Hello and welcome to the Save the Crafty YouTuber video hop on YouTube. These are our sponsors for this event, and I would like to thank Justine for allowing me to participate because this is awesome. So I'm going to color a little Christmas card, and this little digital stamp guy is a Santa Claus and a reindeer, and he is from the Paper Shelter, and it's "Are you ready, my friend?" And we're going to be doing some Copic coloring. And as you saw, I put the Copic colors up in the top left hand corner of the screen, and I do apologize. I tended to color towards the bottom of the screen. I usually put a piece of tape on my mat so I know how far down I can go, and I forgot to put my tape down there, so I apologize. But everything except for this little part right here is within view. You can see it. For my favorite Christmassy reds, I like to use red. And even though I put them up there in the top corner of the screen, I still want to let you know what they are. My darkest is an R59. And then going down from there is R29, R27, and R24. Now, you'll notice as I color, I hold the marker way down on the tip, so it's kind of hard to see what I'm actually coloring. It gives me more control when I'm working on small images. Digital stamps can be resized for a multitude of size of cards, and I wanted to do this on an A2 size card and a landscape card. So I made sure that my images were appropriate to that card size, and it does make it a little bit smaller. And for me to get down in there, I have to hold the marker tip closer to the nib. And you might find that that works for you to give you better control over your strokes. You'll also notice that I'm not doing any fancy strokes on my images. I'm actually doing little lines of color starting in my shadow areas where I want my darkest area to be. And then I will go back over that color with all of my colors. And sometimes that will wash your dark color out. You can go back in and put some additional dark color in that area. It's not going to hurt anything. The only thing that I will say about working with red Copic markers is reds bleed. And if your paper gets too saturated or is just saturated from your coloring, then it can bleed. And what I would recommend is if you decide that you need to go back in and add some additional color, is to let it dry first. And alcohol markers do dry fairly quickly, but give it about 10 minutes before you go back in there and let the paper completely 100% dry before you go back in with the red. It just bleeds so easy. The other thing that I would like to note is that if your darkest red doesn't give you as much oomph as you would like it to, as much depth, a W5 over top of that R59 makes a really great shadow, and it really deepens the color on that red. And I did need to go back and add it. I didn't show it just because it was as I put the card together and I went to take pictures of it, that red really wasn't popping, so I went back and added the W5. Now I'm moving on to the beard and the little tuft of hair that's sticking out at the top there. And for the beard, I'm doing a W5, a W3, and a W1. And I'm using my warm gray markers so that it will be different from the hat and the fuzzies around his arms, because I want to portray white. And I'm doing this pretty early on because I want you to see how dark this actually seems right now as we're coloring it. It seems like, oh, I'm going to have a dirty gray beard and it's just going to look terrible. Nobody's going to want to see that. But as you put all of the other colors around it, including the background, then that warm gray actually looks just like it's a warm gray white beard. So I put in my darkest color in just a few little places, and then I moved on to my lighter colors. I'm doing the same basic thing with C5, C3, C1 and a colorless blender on the hat. and on the fuzzy ball, and I'll also do it on the fuzzies on his sleeves. I'm doing little strokes. I know you can't see my hand when I'm coloring right now because I'm holding the marker so close to that nib and you can't see it. I'm just doing teeny tiny little flicks of that C5 around the edges and in some of the little crevices that are drawn in and behind his little ear, so that I can get some dimension on the end of his hat. Santa's hat would be a little dirty from going up and down all those chimneys. So I wanted to make sure that I kind of got that. It's kind of a little dirty. He's saying hi to his friend at the beginning of an evening or the end of an evening or whatever. And, you know, his hat's just a little titch dirty, but it also looks like it has some texture to it. And to achieve that, I just went over everything with a colorless blender, and I took everything down just a notch. And it really, when it dries, right now it looks like a hot mess because the paper's wet, so it looks really gray. It's picking up that the undercoat of that paper, but it looks amazing once we get the card together. Don't ever judge your coloring while you're coloring. Finish what you're coloring before you judge it. Practice, practice, practice. If you're not sure about shadows, print out a practice one or stamp out a practice one and color it just like you're planning on coloring for your card. Just practice on it. It does not have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be 4 color blends on it. You could do this with a 2-color blend. If you were going to do this card with a 2-color blend, for the reds, I would recommend R24 and R29. And you might have to work to blend the edges of those colors out a little bit, but those are going to give you a true red color instead of just a tomato color like the R24 would. So that would just be my recommendation if you wanted to do an R20, just a 2-color blend in that small space. And you'll also notice that when I'm doing this, I'm not doing a whole lot of, quote, blending on this. I go back, I put down my darkest color, and then I'll go over it with my second color and go out from that just a tad bit, and then I go out with my third color and go out just a little bit, but I don't go back and forth between my colors a whole lot unless I need to add to it. So this is my traditional skin tone, E04, E11, E21, E00, and E000. And what I'm going to do with the E04 is literally just outline his little face and put some dark spots in his ears and on the bottom side of his nose for the little Santa Claus, and right at the back of the bridge of his nose, and put those shadows in there. And then I'm going to go over top of that E04 with my E11 and blend it out. And literally all you're doing is coloring over that same line of color. You're not flicking, you're not doing comma marks, you're not doing anything. You're literally just coloring over top of it in little lines. Everybody can color in lines. So just remember that. Everybody can color in little lines. And I go a teeny tiny little bit further out. Teeny tiny little bit further out. Teeny tiny little bit further out with my colors as I go back to my lightest color. And I'll fill everything in, and I put a little rosy cheek on him in a minute, and I did that with an R21, I believe. Yep, R21. There we go. Little rosy cheek for Santa Claus. Santa's got to have rosy cheeks. And I blended that out just a tad bit with the E000. I went back in and I found there's some neck showing back there, and I wanted to make sure I got that colored in. And now we're going to, I fixed a little something there, I think. Now we're going to move on to his boots. And Santa's always, in my mind, always had black boots. And to color black, you have to color with grays. And I also colored with the 100, C9, C7, and a C05. I'm sorry, a C5, not an 05, just a C5. And I put that dark black 100 marker just in a few little shadow areas. And then I went in with the C9. And on camera, it kind of looks like it all blobs and blends together. But after the paper dries and in the photos, you'll see that it doesn't. You still actually see the lines that the artist drew in here. And I'll also go in with a white gel pen in a few minutes and put some highlights on the boots, nose, hat, and the reindeer. And I made the reindeer Rudolph. You have to have Rudolph at Christmas. So I'm putting all this stuff on here. All this stuff. Listen to me. I'm acting like it's no big deal. I colored the bottom of his shoes with a C5. I did not put much depth on them because we're looking at them straight on, so they're not going to have a whole lot of shadow or anything on them. Now for his belt, I colored it black as well. So I started on the very edges around the belly with the darkest marker of the 100. And then I put that also in around the belt buckle and under where his coat is sticking over the belt buckle a little bit. And then I did a C9 on both ends of that, and then worked my way back out to a C5 where the highlight is. And that makes a huge difference to pay that much detail in there, because it really pops that belt highlight. I know it seems like a really small space to put so many colors, but look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Amazing. Now, I wanted his mittens to be red as well. I didn't want to color him black to match his boots. So, in order to keep the distinction between the coat and the mittens, I left a white line at the bottom of his mittens, so I didn't put my darkest color there. And then I went in with my next darkest color, which was the E29, and I just literally went over top of it. I didn't really take that out much. And then I went in with my E27 and filled in a little bit more, and then I filled in the entire rest of the mitten with E24 and smoothed out any lines that were in there and caught the bottom edge of that. So you can see that there's a highlight there on the bottom of those mittens, and that's to tell the distinction between the coat and the mittens. I'm going to color the little collar on Rudolph over here with the same red markers. And as I was editing my video, I noticed that it looks like that my fingernail polish matches that dark R59 there. And it kind of almost does, but my fingernails are actually a little bit more burgundy than that. So I used the same reds, of course, on his nose as well. We have to have a bright, shiny nose for Rudolph. And I used a series of E27, E25, E23, and E21 on the reindeer. And when I get to his antlers, I'm using an E29, E27, and E25 on his antlers. I added that additional darker color there. And for the shadows on Rudolph, I just am putting them on the bottom and along anywhere that light wouldn't directly hit him. And I put some under his eyes, around his little nose, behind his ear, around his eyes a little bit so they stand out a little bit, in between his hoofs and on those back legs. And I take, actually, the E27's the darkest that I have on Rudolph, and so that those back legs stay in the background, I take my next darkest color, my E25, and also put just color in the back legs completely. There's no highlighted color on those. And then I took out the color just a little bit, and I do flick some here and there to be able to blend the color out, but you'll also see me go back over it again, and that's to get rid of that line that's there. And sometimes it's hard to get rid of that line, and you just go over it and over it and over it until it disappears. And whether you're flicking, or whether you're just drawing the line colors, or whether you're doing some other technique that you really like and get good results from, then just keep going over it and working it until you get what you want. Not everybody's reindeer is going to look exactly the same. Everybody's going to put down different amounts of color and color it way % okay. You don't have to color anything that you don't like. Just plain and simple. It's your world. You're coloring it. Don't forget that. Do what makes you happy when you're coloring. If you are interested in learning more about Copics and how they kind of work together, or color theory, or you do want to learn more and be a better colorist with your Copic markers or even colored pencils, I have two of our sponsors. Actually, I've taken their classes, and that's Sandy Allnock and also Kitten Clowder. And I've taken both of their classes, and both of Elise and Sandy teach very, very, very different styles. I learned more about color theory and how different colors work together in the Copic line of markers from Sandy, where I learned technique and how to color in really small spaces and that kind of thing from Kitten Clowder. So it depends on what you're looking for, and if you want both of those kinds of techniques, then definitely check them out. Elise and Sandy both have great resources on their websites, and a quick Google search, you can find both of them, and very reasonably priced as well. And I enjoy and still actually take classes from Kitten Clowder. I'm taking a drawing class currently from Sandy Allnock. So just keep that in mind. If you want to improve, you have some really great resources out there to utilize. If you noticed, I'll back up in the card. I colored out some color swatches over there. I had 3 yellows that I thought maybe would work for the bell and for the buckle, but I wasn't sure which one, so I just scribbled them out and picked the one that I liked the best. And I believe it was a YR15 as the color that I ended up using there. So when I finish coloring this, I'm not a fussy cutter. I cannot fussy cut. It's not my strong suit. I don't like it. So I will cut this square of paper out, and I will put it on a pick scan mat for my silhouette and cut it out. And my pick scan mat works beautifully to cut out digital stamps, or even just stamps that I don't have dies for and that kind of thing. So just keep in mind that there are ways to cut your stamps out other than fussy cutting. I'm not a fussy cutter. I don't like fussy cutting. So I took it over to my machine, did that, and it takes me like 2 seconds to take the picture and put it in and get everything done to do the pick scan mat. It would take me twice as long to fussy cut it. But there's my little image all cut out, and I'm using Nina Solar White 110 pound for my base. And I just went through my stash of patterned paper and found this shiny, pretty snowflake paper. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it was from Stampin' Up! A couple years ago, and part of their designer paper series. And then the green and the stripy paper is actually from a Doodlebug pack, and it's the Dot Stripe Rainbow Petite pack, and it's a 6x6 paper pad. And I used the MFT stitched rectangle frames to die cut those down, the A2 frames, and to be able to layer this. I didn't want a whole lot of distraction in the background on this, but I did want it to read kind of Christmassy. So, and I wanted it to kind of look like they were sitting on something. So I just did a green background, and the floor is the brown piece. And now I'm going to cover the back of my little image here with some foam tape and Scotch foam tape. And I just covered the entire thing with some Scotch foam tape. And I'm going to put that on there. And then we're going to stamp a sentiment from the Concord and Ninth stamp set that I cannot remember the name of, and it's not sitting close by. I'm sorry. I'll put it definitely in the description below, and it'll be over on my blog as well. And I wanted to make sure that my red paper, because you know there's a million different shades of red out there, so I wanted to make sure that my red paper matched my red coloring and didn't clash with it. And so I pulled out a piece of paper. This red cardstock is from Echo Park, and it is from their 12 by 12, part of their back to school collection, I believe is what that's from. It has a little bit of texture to it. It's not big and heavy. So this card is something that you would be able to color and put together really quickly and mail without any hassle at all. I'm using detail white embossing powder from Hero Arts. It turns really, really bright white, so that's why I wanted to use it. And make sure that my heat gun is really, 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 really hot. Y'all don't need to see the heat gun heating up, but you have to see the magic of the embossing powder. Look at that! Ah, every single time gets me. So I trimmed this down really, really, really close. I wanted it to be very close. And I thought about matting it and making it look like it's a picture hanging on a wall behind them, but I didn't like that. I just took my hand and rubbed over the embossing to get the embossing powder off of it. Not the embossing powder, the embossing buddy, the anti-static powder tool, to make sure I got all the powder off of it. And then I just cropped the rest of it down really close and made it, I really, really like that for some reason. And ta-da, we're going to adhere that over in the top right hand corner. And then we have our little Christmas card. Thank you so much for joining me today. And don't forget to head over to the next video YouTube stop on our hop along here on YouTube. And thank you so much. And be sure to subscribe to Jill Cameron Creations and all the other creative channels that we are sharing in this YouTube hop. Have a great day.